What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, June 2nd, 2016. Sure, happy it's Thursday. Sure, happy it's Thursday. Sure, happy it's Thursday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, hand hovering over the phone, ready to answer and put you on the air with your comments and questions. A couple of quick program notes. Next Tuesday, June 7th, Peter Koenig will be on our show talking about the coming collapse of the European Union. Wednesday, we'll have Don Wiskin talking again about Extendovite. It's a really good product. Claire and I use it, and it really does make a difference. And also, speaking of Claire, she will be joining us in the third hour today because tomorrow Claire and I have a prior commitment that, well, it's not a matter of getting out of it. We don't want to get out of it. So there's going to be a best of show playing tomorrow, but we'll be back live on Monday. So please keep that in mind for your programming awareness for the coming weekend here. All right, let's start here. The politics is turning into a real circus. Hillary Clinton just finished a long press conference that was nothing but screaming and frothing at the mouth about how Donald Trump doesn't know how the world works because Hillary Clinton's world is full of corruption and treason and betrayal, and Donald Trump is just completely inexperienced with things like killing off lawyers and dumping them in suburban Washington, D.C. parks. So, of course, he's not qualified to be President of the United States of America. And Hillary doesn't seem to understand it's the fact that Trump is from the outside that is his big draw. The American people are sick of politics as usual. We're sick of business as usual. We're sick of all the wars. And Hillary Clinton is out there just pushing the war agenda. I will protect the United States. Well, the United States doesn't need protecting. The United States is doing all the attacking. Now, things are heating up in California. Bernie Sanders is continuing to draw huge, huge crowds out there. And the latest polls are showing Sanders and Clinton basically tied at this point. And Hillary's probably getting very, very nervous about that because if she were to lose California, you know, her legend of being the presumptive Democratic nominee is going to go up in smoke. It's going to be a horse race. Now, already there are some dirty tricks going on. Reports out of Orange County, California, poll workers have been told to give no party preference voters, that means unaligned voters, a provisional ballot as opposed to the regular ballot. And the difference is provisional ballots generally don't get counted unless there's an absolute tie. And so it's another trick to undermine Bernie Sanders' support among independents. Story coming out of Investment Watch blog, computer super nerds are in agreement voting machines are not a good idea. They are wide open to fraud, apparently by design. And if you have not been there, there's a website you need to visit called blackboxvoting.org. It's run by this wonderful lady, Bev Harris, and she has just dedicated her life for years and years and years on ferreting out all the weaknesses in these electronic voting machines, and she documented no less than 12 different ways you could change the outcome of an election on a Diebold voting machine or some of these others and leave no trace whatsoever. There was a wonderful HBO documentary called Hacking Democracy that centered on Bev Harris and election fraud and these electronic machines. And at the very end of the documentary, they go into a county voting center where the machines are stored and the officials are there, and they demonstrate how easy it is to steal elections with these electronic voting machines. Now remember, when you talk about Diebold's reputation was based on automated bank teller machines that never lost a penny from one end of the country to the other. They had paper records inside. They were fully auditable, traceable, verifiable. For that same company to come up with an election machine with no verification, no audit, 12 different ways to change the outcome of an election, it had to be by design. And when activists were going on in and saying, we need to know that these machines are accurate, Diebold was in a tizzy. No, this is proprietary equipment and software. Like there's something proprietary about a piece of software that says if this button gets pushed, add 1 to this register. It's a vote-stealing system. It really is. That's why the government tried to mandate them all over the country so they could cling to power. Now, there's a new documentary out about Anthony Weiner and the adventures with his wiener on his cell phone. It's very, very poor timing, of course, for the Hillary Clinton campaign because Anthony Weiner's wife is Huma Abedin. And apparently, she does not come across very well in this documentary. She comes across as suffering victim ornamental spouse, hardly the kind of individual that you would think would be Hillary's right-hand person and enabler. So that's going to work against them. Now, speaking of documentaries, and by the way, I didn't waste the money on the Weiner documentary. I could care less. I absolutely could care less. But we did catch a movie last night that I am going to recommend that you all see. In fact, this is your homework. You need to see this movie. It's on pay-per-view over the weekend. There'll be a pop quiz on Monday to make sure that you watched it. It's Michael Moore's latest film called Where to Invade Next. And if you're wondering why you haven't heard about it, it hasn't really gotten a distribution deal. It's private screenings, the pay-per-view channel, and you can buy the Blu-ray and the DVD, and we're going to buy a bunch of DVDs and send them out to people. And I think this is his best film ever. Now, I don't agree 100% with everything he says in it. He's very much on board this idea of inherited collective guilt. You know, that the German people carry the responsibility for what happened before they were born, which I don't agree with. But that issue aside, it's an absolutely stunning comparison of life in the United States versus life in these other countries. And I'm not going to give the surprises away. You need to see it to believe it. You need to see this film. And it's Michael Moore, Where to Invade Next. And I think it's his best documentary yet. It really, really is. And I can understand why there are a lot of people in positions of power in this country who do not want you to see it. Maybe they tried to put out the Weiner documentary to steal the audience away. Oh, people aren't going to watch Michael Moore. They want to go see Anthony Weiner and Huma Abedin. No, actually, we don't. Now, more and more independent media outlets are starting to pay attention to this huge, huge scandal of fraud at the Clinton Foundation. And there's this gentleman, Charles Ortel. He's a Wall Street professional. His business is financial analysis and determining if companies are crooked. And he was very much involved in the investigation into AIG back in 2008. And he has studied the Clinton Foundation in depth. He says their required filings as to the money coming in and going out are not legal. They do not comply with the requirements for charitable foundations, and the numbers are not adding up. And they're basically saying the Clinton Foundation took in more than $100 billion, and most of that money is unaccountable. They don't know where it went. It just vanished. Now, here's what's going on. Each act of solicitation for a donation to a charity fraud is a felony. And where it gets interesting is everybody says, oh, the president will pardon, president will pardon, president will pardon. Well, Obama can pardon an individual for a federal crime. President Obama cannot pardon anybody convicted of a state crime or convicted of a crime in a foreign country. And right now, the Clintons are all legally vulnerable. Now, the big story, of course, is that next Monday, Brian Pagliano is expected to give his deposition in the Judicial Watch Freedom of Information Act lawsuit that the Obama administration and the Department of Injustice are fighting tooth and nail, and he's already announced through his lawyer he's going to exercise his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. There are a couple of problems with that. This is not a criminal proceeding. Brian Pagliano already has immunity, which means he cannot invoke the Fifth Amendment. If he tries to, the judge could throw him in prison. And finally, what we're talking about here with Brian Pagliano is the setting up of an email server. And by him taking the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination is basically telling us there was something criminal about the way that private email server was set up. Now, Obama's and Hillary's and Department of Justice lawyers are all treating this as a legal matter, which is okay. That's what they're trained to do, and that's what their job is. But politics is perception. And when Brian Pagliano takes the Fifth next Monday, it's going to send shockwaves all across the country because it proclaims there is a cover-up. Some kind of crime was committed involving Hillary Clinton's private email server. It was wide open, very easy to break into. Apparently, one of the things that's come out so far in the depositions, Hillary Clinton didn't even have a password on her State Department email account. And at this point, it's pretty much safe to say that Moscow, Beijing, Tehran, cyber criminals know a lot more about Hillary Clinton and her emails than you, the American people, do. That State Department Inspector General's report has knocked the legs out from underneath Clinton's defenders. Now, Hillary's defenders are out there saying she didn't mean to do wrong. There was no criminal intent. It doesn't matter. Title 18 says the crime is any exposure of America's classified information to possible interception, even through accident and negligence. Now, if you're fiddling with your cell phone and you run a red light and you kill a pedestrian on that crosswalk, I think we're all safe in assuming you did not intend to do wrong. You did not intend to kill that person, but you're probably still going to jail. The same principle applies here. And Hillary's out there with all of her lie after lie, that her email server was permitted, that it was legal, and the State Department is saying, no, in point of fact, it was not. They're still trying to say that none of the emails she received were marked as classified. Well, some of that information on her server is automatically classified on creation, such as satellite data. That never exists in an unclassified form. It's another lie. And we have Hillary dead to rights on Title 18, Section 793, because of that email she sent to Jacob Sullivan instructing him to remove the classification markings from a classified document and send it to her by non-secure means. And it doesn't matter what was in the document. It doesn't matter why she did it. It doesn't even matter if Jacob never carried through with that order. The issuance of that instruction to remove the classification headers, that's a felony violation right there. Now, there's an article out of Patriot Rising, Hillary's on the ropes. And more people are starting to talk about the crime of espionage. Now, espionage means legally more than just spying for a foreign government or selling secrets. Its legal definition includes the complete failure to secure and preserve the secrecy of confidential, secret, or top secret materials, which applies not only to Hillary Clinton, but to all of her staffers. There's a wonderful little video that's up at WhatReallyHappened.com. Hillary Clinton emails fact or fiction in her own words. And they have video clips of Hillary's lies about her server contradicted by the facts, as reported even on the corporate media. She broke all the rules. She is not trustworthy. And we cannot have somebody in the Oval Office that thinks they're above the law and above the rules, because that is dictatorship. And Hillary's defenders, they're getting desperate. They're getting really desperate. Thomas Friedman is out there saying that, okay, Hillary lied. We all know politicians lie. It's no big deal. Of course she lied. What? You're being so picky. She's lying to you. You really expect politicians to be truthful? No, we demand politicians be truthful to us. We demand truth from this government. Nowhere in the Constitution of the United States of America is the government given permission to lie or deceive or mislead the American people, and the 10th Amendment prohibits them from assuming that. But when you're out there trying to defend Hillary by saying, yeah, she lied, it's no big deal, they've run out of any other defenses. Hillary's still trying to say there was no classified information going in and out of her server. Okay, the job of Secretary of State involves a large amount of classified information. So if it wasn't going to her private email server and she wasn't using her State Department email account, what server was she using for the classified information? That's why her lie was obvious right from the beginning. She was trying to create this impression that even though she was serving as Secretary of State of the United States of America, that she just wasn't getting any classified information at all. Somebody spotted another ad in Craigslist hiring people to protest at Trump rallies for $15 an hour. They're still trying to get their rent-a-mobs. And by the way, did you notice none of these hired protesters showed up at the Bikers for Trump rally? Gee, I wonder why. I mean, $15 is $15 here. Now, getting on back to California, it's going to be an ugly situation. Remember, not too long ago, California's Governor Jerry Brown signed a bill that lets illegal aliens vote, because when they go get a driver's license, they're registered to vote without checking their citizenship. And that means there are registrations for these people to vote or for somebody to use in vote fraud. Now, as far as the Dump Trump campaign is going, it's in serious, serious trouble. Remember, William Kristol is out there saying, we're going to get a third-party candidate to take votes away from Donald Trump. And he basically finally settled on this guy that nobody has heard of, David French, to be the independent candidate that will bring down Donald Trump. And apparently, this guy is on record saying that the white working class communities of the United States of America deserve to die. So, Bill, you're raising on a busted flush on this one. Complete waste of time, energy, and money. You just make yourself look silly. But then again, Bill Kristol thought the Iraq War was only going to last 2 months here. Now, you've probably heard it. It's been on the corporate media for the last few minutes. Over at the Air Force Academy, they were having their graduation ceremony, and Obama made a speech, and they overflew the ceremony with one of the Thunderbirds, which apparently developed, the engine failed. And the pilot succeeded in putting it down in a field, and then he punched out of the plane. The pilot's okay. The airplane looks like it could actually be repaired. But I'm sure that's got to be making Obama very nervous right now. So let's turn over to the war zones, emphasis on the plural, because it's getting intense out there. There is increasing chaos on the border between Syria and Turkey. NATO is in there, pedal to the metal, trying to win this proxy war. So is the U.S. They're trying to turn things around. They're still trying to get rid of Bashar al-Assad and replace him with a U.S. puppet ruler. They've been trying for 5 years now. They're trying to figure out some way they can get Russia out of Syria, which is why that Syrian Observatory for Human Rights was using a 6-month-old photo to try and claim that Russia was bombing civilians. But you need to understand something. The Syrian government has asked Russia to be there. The Syrian government has not asked the United States or any of its allies to come into Syria for any reason whatsoever. That's an important distinction to maintain. Russia is there at the invitation and permission of the legitimate government of Syria. The United States is not. We will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call. Steve in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, you know, along with your review from Michael Moore's movie, The Big Short, I don't know if you've seen that yet.
Oh, I loved it.
It's a must-see movie.
I loved it. Absolutely. I recommend it highly.
Yeah, I think it's going to happen again. Hey, a question for you on that movie, The Big Short. If this is a repeat and we see this again, and I think we will, I talked to my next-door neighbor realtor, and I said, you know, they're doing it all over again. you think the American people will finally rise up and say, hey, wait, that's twice a bailout? Do you think they'll finally rise up and say something? Do you think they'll do anything about it?
Well, remember what it said in the Declaration of Independence, people are disposed to suffer evils while evils are sufferable, and all tyrants are basically trying to operate within that zone of getting away with as much as they can without triggering some kind of a revolution. But every once in a while, a ruler will make a miscalculation and step over the line. Charles I, Louis XVI, Ceausescu, Mussolini, and it could easily happen here.
Yeah. And there's something else I've noticed that, we know how controlling the media is and biased it is, but I look at some things and I say coincidence or purposeful. Last couple of days, I just noticed that they're televising a brand new series, the Roots series, a whole new Roots series with Lawrence Fishburne, and they're also playing Global Warming, An Inconvenient Truth, over and over again with Al Gore. I mean, this has to be very purposeful.
Well, again, a big part of Hillary Clinton's campaign, in fact, while she's in California, she's meeting with all these black community leaders and trying to fan up this, the whites are coming to get you unless you vote for me because underneath my skin I'm actually black like you, and blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, they're trying to fan up racial tension as a tool to keep us divided against each other. And that's the only reason to remake Roots as opposed to, simply replaying the earlier version. And, yeah, they're out there pushing that global warming as hard as they can because they need to hit us with a carbon tax. Obamacare has not delivered the windfall of new tax revenues the government was expecting it to. And they're absolutely dead broke. They need to find another way to take more money from us.
Hey, thanks, Michael.
All right, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Now then, getting on back to the wars here, Russia is basically saying that the buildup of NATO troops on Russia's borders cannot go unanswered. And they're basically saying that NATO is the provocateur here. And they're absolutely correct about that. NATO and the U.S. are trying to start a war. Hopefully so that you'll forget about what happened at Benghazi, IRS targeting of dissidents, the Department of Justice spying on reporters, the NSA spying on all of you, and all the rest of it. Now, the U.S. is kicking off this 10,000-strong military drill near Russia's borders. A large part of it is taking place right where Ukraine connects with Crimea. And the U.S. could just decide to blitzkrieg Crimea without any warning whatsoever, and then dare Russia to do something about it. Because a major part of the overthrow of the government of the Ukraine in the installation of that junta in Kiev was to deny Russia the use of ports in Crimea, which would limit their access to the Black Sea. And I don't think it's a coincidence that they're standing right there on that border with Crimea. And I'm very concerned what might happen if they decide to just cross into it. Now, Russia is trying to send a gentle message that everybody needs to take a moment, take a deep breath, and think very carefully about what's going on. And they're reminding NATO and the United States that all of these rockets that they're putting into Eastern Europe are old technology, and Russia's latest generation of hypersonic, high-altitude, maneuverable platforms are easily going to be able to evade them. Putin is trying to calm this thing down. Unfortunately, from the point of view of the U.S. government, they have to have a war. And it looks like they're going to start one. We've got to take a break for commercials. Back with a phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go right to the telephones here. Keith in Montana, aloha. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I got a couple things. First of all, I wanted to thank you and Claire for working with those that need food and stuff. But the other thing was, I don't know if people really put things into perspective or not, but if you think of the 300,000 veterans that were lied to and have died over the course of this, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm listening.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I'm watching on the computer, and I forget that there's a delay on the audio. Anyway, anyway, with 300,000 dead veterans there that served this country over these lies, and you got the bodies of 274 Marines dumped in that Virginia landfill.
Yes.
And now you have that New York Times article that boasted about how the U.S. government paid $80 million plus with some change to those two psychologists to create this torture program. And then you have that same evidence now dropped or destroyed. It's all a total lie. And you just think what all that money would have done to go through, for the veterans, the starving, all that,
Well, you see, from the point of view of the war hawks and the money junkies, starving people and wounded veterans aren't of any use, so why spend any money on them? And we see that all the time. All the money that is spent taking a normal, well-adjusted 18-year-old and turning them into a killing machine, and then after they're all used up, no, we're not going to spend any more money. It doesn't get us anything. It doesn't get us what we want.
Yeah, I just can't believe the amount of money that this country spends on war, as well as its budget and everything like that. It just and then to watch American citizens sit there starving, are homeless, they're losing their homes because they can't afford it. It's ridiculous.
It absolutely is. And again, when you watch that Michael Moore film, you're going to see how America's standard of living and our civil rights have seriously declined compared to Europe. Now, Moore obviously made this film before the influx of refugees that was brought on in to try and blur it all and make it go away. But you need to understand, from the point of view of the New World Order, they need to drive the entire planet down to third world dirt poverty to drop the borders, and also because that's the only way they can feel rich. That's one of the problems with a money junkie. It doesn't matter how much they actually have. If they can't look out the windows of their palaces and see everybody else struggling just to feed themselves, they don't really feel that they're rich.
Yeah, I saw the trailer for that. I can't afford watching that show yet, but I do plan on watching it when I can, though. But yeah, I like it. As you say, you don't totally agree with everything that Michael Moore says, but he has some good valid points. I remember when he did the one about going down to Cuba and they had all the free health care.
Yeah.
But, I'm also reminded there when John Pilger did that War on Democracy video with Chavez, and that was at a time when Venezuela was doing great, and now you have all these U.S. sanctions against Venezuela driving their oil market down into the dumps. Now you have the starving down there, eggs $150 a dozen, people eating their pets. I mean, you would think that Americans have a conscience to realizing what their government is doing. The same thing with down in Brazil or anything else like that,
Well, again, the main reason that I would like to see Donald Trump in the White House is he's going to shake up a system that is badly in need of a shake-up. I mean, let's be honest. The entire city of Washington, D.C. is in dire need of an enema at this point.
That was put it politely.
Yes.
All right. Well, my best to you, and I guess you guys are going to take off tomorrow there. So
yeah, we have something we need to do.
Yeah, well, thanks for robbing us 2 days out of this week.
Hey, Monday wasn't my idea. I was prepared to do a live show, but, our very much overworked and underpaid technical staff wanted the day off, and I could hardly fault them for that, okay?
Okay, take care, okay.
All right, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch over to John in Barbados. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Yes, I watched the Michael Moore film, and I laughed all the way through, because it's laughter that actually ingrains upon you what is actually going on. And I like particularly that Icelandic CEO, the lady who said, you couldn't pay me to live in America or to have an American neighbor.
Yeah, well, I mean, because of the actions of our government, the world sees us as the new Nazis. And that is not a legacy that I would care to leave to the next generation of Americans. But if we're not able to seriously alter the course of future war and political developments in this country, future generations of Americans are going to be carrying this stain. People who are not even born yet, You know, the way that Michael Moore was saying that the Germans alive today somehow bear the guilt for events that happened before they were born. That's one area of the movie I absolutely disagree with. I refuse to accept responsibility for events outside my control, especially things that happened before I was born. I refuse. I'm not going to feel guilty about anything that happened back in the 1860s.
Yeah, well, the other thing I want to comment on, Michael, is this rush to war with the Russians.
Yes.
I've been reading lots about their equipment and their military ethics and how they, what tactics they use. And according to some analysts, military analysts, within 60 hours of a war starting, they'll be on the Channel Coast.
I doubt the 60-hour, but you're absolutely right, because, first of all, while the U.S. is spending so much more money on the military than anybody else, it's spent recklessly, foolishly. They're just rebuilding over and over the weapons that won World War II. They haven't moved with the times, and their efforts to do so turn out to be disasters, like the F-35. And that's a consequence of having turned our back on manufacturing, because our very best engineers and designers have already left this country for greener pastures, like Europe.
Well, unfortunately, the way these analysts put it is that the amount of troops that are available in those first few hours will be, will be overrun by huge numbers of Russians. Simple as that. Because their equipment is so much better, and it's not being used like America's equipment in Iraq and Afghanistan and all these places. It's like almost brand new and ready to go.
It is brand new. It's modern, it's updated, it's capable, it's cost effective. They're getting more bang for their buck, so to speak. But if war breaks out, when war breaks out between NATO and Russia, the opening salvos are not going to be fought with infantry or even tanks. It's going to be an aerial edge-of-space war, and it's going to be over almost instantly. And then after that, the tanks and infantry will come in and just bloody up the place.
Yep. That's more or less what these military analysts were saying. The missile war will be first.
Yes.
And being as the Russian missiles are so much more capable than America's, that it will be over very quickly.
Well, again, the entire doctrine of the U.S. ballistic missile defense is a predictable inbound target, and both Russia and China have changed that game. They have maneuverable delivery vehicles. There's no way to know where they're going to be when your interceptor finally gets up to them.
And finally, I want to mention the Syrian war, because what appears to be happening now is these different factions, these Takfiris and Daesh and Al-Qaeda and Al-Nusra, they're fighting amongst each other for leadership, and it's descending into chaos.
Yes, it is. It absolutely is. Okay, anything else?
Yeah, I mean, Russia's told Turkey to get the hell out of northern Iraq, or
Yes.
else. But they haven't said what the or else is.
You know, I don't think it takes much of a stretch of the imagination to figure that out. All right, well, listen, John, we're going to let you go here. Thank you very much for the phone call, and we're going to get back to the news here. And I'm trying to multitask again, which is always a disaster. Now, political analysts are looking at Defense Secretary Ashton Carter's going over to Southeast Asia as being an indicator that the U.S. is preparing for war with China. Remember what this is all about. This is a war between the U.S. paper Federal Reserve note and China's gold-backed trade currency and Russia's ruble. That's what this is all about. That's what's driving this. We're going to grab a phone call. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello?
You're on the air. You're on the air.
Okay. Okay, I just want to say that I don't know whether our leaders are actually out and out insane, because even in the Cold War, I mean, thank God we had two level-headed men in Kennedy and Khrushchev in the Cuban Missile Crisis. We might not have a world today. But I had a show on the other day. I forget where it was. I think it might have been. I used to be in Coast to Coast, John B. Wells.
Yes.
He had a guy on said something like one of these bombs today is 17,000 times more powerful than what was dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now, nobody would survive. I don't care what these madmen think. If they think they can go into a bunker or something like that, there'd be nothing to come out of that bunker. I mean, the world would be finished. Plain and simple.
Well, actually,
what is it?
To be accurate, both the United States and Russia, in fact, pretty much all the world's nuclear powers, have moved away from the really big strategic nuclear weapons, and the focus has been on developing what are called tactical nuclear weapons of much smaller and adjustable yield in order to control the collateral or secondary damage. And they really do think they can win a nuclear war with these smaller weapons.
But do you honestly think that whoever's on the losing side or perceives to be in a losing side is not going to resort to the big boys again?
Probably it will. Probably it will. And, again, all these people with their little brass keys to the missile silos, they've got their bunkers. You all paid for them. You will not be allowed into them. But the government and the war hawks are the biggest preppers of all. And, again, you paid for all of it.
I think if it ever comes down to the fact that it looks like war is imminent, we should find where these bunkers, we should know where these bunkers are already.
Yes.
And make sure these creeps don't get into those bunkers. We kill them before they get in.
Oh, no, I have a better idea. Let them go down into the bunkers and then cement over the doors.
Yeah, but the problem is, by that time, there might not be any cement to put on the doors. I mean, it might be over by then. We're talking maybe minutes.
Well, I'm more optimistic than you are. I think the vast majority of people will survive that first exchange. And, yeah, then we find all these bunkers where all these money junkies and war hawks are in, and we just cement over the hatches and leave them down there.
Why not kill them and go in there ourselves? At least as many decent people as possible.
Because leaving them down there, it takes them longer to suffer and die. Okay? That's what I'm thinking. Okay?
That's good. You got a point there.
All right. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. As John was mentioning here, the situation in Venezuela is dire. The last price I heard on eggs was $150 a dozen. They are eating their pets and anything else they can trap. I'm willing to predict in another 2 months we're going to get reports of cannibalism going on down there. And there's a very interesting article over in the Real News basically laying it out. Is there an economic and political war against Venezuela? Yes, there is, and there has been, going back to the days of Hugo Chavez for daring to sell Venezuela's oil for the yuan. How could you do that? And they tried to get Chavez out. They actually succeeded in a coup d'etat against him where he was out of office for a grand total of 8 days when the people of Venezuela said, no, we're going to put him back in. We don't want a U.S.-approved puppet regime. And so Venezuela's become a point of honor with the U.S. Once we decide a nation is doomed, we will doom it. And a big part of Venezuela's downfall, if you will, is generated from the outside. There was that disastrous and poorly thought-out oil price war that was supposed to be targeting Russia and actually backflashed more on countries in the West. The U.S., the fracking industry, which I'm not going to cry about, Canada, Venezuela. It was not thought all the way through. Plus, there are all the economic sanctions because those gosh darn Venezuelans won't do what the U.S. government wants them to do. And any careful analysis of what is going on in the world today shows it is the U.S. government and its friends, the money junkies, who are behind all these machinations that are literally risking the incineration of the surface of planet Earth in this argument over whose brand of ink and paper we're all going to use for the next 100 years. Now, Caracas is out there saying that they have got word through their intelligence services of a military intervention coming into Venezuela. That now that Venezuela is in chaos and weak, there may be an armed takeover of the government of Venezuela. Gee, now, who would do a thing like that, I wonder? Over in Israel, a couple of articles out of Desert Peace, whitewashing a murder caught on film. And this has to do with that very horrible shooting of a Palestinian who was on the ground, completely under control, and one of the Israelis just comes on up and shoots him in the head. And there's been another video that has come on out of that scene, in which the Israelis are planting a knife on this guy so they could say he was a danger, he was a threat, he was going to stab us. We had to kill him. And they got caught. Now, over in France, their leader of the Jewish Defense League is on the run in Israel. He was convicted in Paris on violent gang attacks. He was receiving a prison sentence. I don't know why he was not already in prison, but he got out of France and he's down in Israel. Now, the Jewish Defense League is an ultra-right-wing terrorist group, and it's designated a terrorist group by the United States and even by Israel. And in the U.S. not too long ago, the JDL actually was trying to blow up a mosque in Los Angeles and plotted the murder of a United States member of Congress. And Irv Rubin, who was the head of the JDL, was arrested, and he was going to testify and blow the whistle at the trial. And then, golly gee shuckies, he just got so depressed. And he died in prison, conveniently. A little bit of good news coming out of France. The courts in France have overturned a government ban on an event for the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. So we're starting to see France pull back from this slavish obedience to Israel. Getting kind of tired of all this nonsense anyway. Right now, latest polls are showing a third of U.S. students support the boycott of Israel, and the numbers are going up. They're losing their propaganda war. And that's why Netanyahu is out there saying he wants to censor the global internet, because it's mostly tech-savvy students who are out there on the internet instead of sucking down the pap coming from the corporate media. We got to take a break. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Let's talk about the economic news here. Alan Greenspan, former chairman of the Federal Reserve, is out there saying the global economy is heading towards a state of disaster. And he's absolutely right. And the reason is very simple. Private central banks, which have enslaved all but a handful of the nations of Earth, are naturally unstable. By design, they produce more debt than money with which to pay that debt. Now, in the past, if a nation enslaved to a private central bank collapsed, which inevitably they would, the other nations enslaved to private central banks would step in, restart the system, refund it, recapitalize it, if you will. Today it's very different. All these private central banks are linked with each other because of globalism and derivatives. And when it starts to come apart, it's going to come apart everywhere. And that giant 11th marble is out there, and it's grown to the size of the moon, and it's heading in for impact. Over in Saudi Arabia, which has suffered greatly because of that misguided oil price war against Russia, is having to issue $15 billion in bonds. And Saudi Arabia is a nation that never had to issue bonds before, quite a contrast to the United States, which is constantly issuing bonds. The contagion is definitely spreading. Speaking of contagion, and a clever segue into Obamacare, we are now getting word that next year the premiums for these Obamacare-compliant health insurance policies are going to explode, in some cases as much as 60%. What a swell deal Obamacare turned out to be. It did not, in fact, make health care affordable to Americans. Quite the reverse. We're paying huge amounts of money for these mandated health insurance policies that have sky-high deductibles. The average American will not be able to use these health insurance policies in the average year because of those deductibles. More and more people are just canceling their policies and accepting the IRS penalties. And the insurance companies that were behind all of this, they're starting to pull out. They're losing money. They're already screaming the government owes them a bailout for betraying them, which is nonsense. All right, so let's talk about the Brexit. Over in Great Britain, they're expecting a record turnout of voters on this issue. And the fear campaign is still being ramped up, how if there's a Brexit vote, British expats living in Europe will be banned from working and banned from living. They'll have to go back to Great Britain, which, if you consider how much better off Britain is going to be out of the European Union, probably most of the expat Brits are going to do just that anyway. All right, we're going to take a break here for our top-of-the-hour station identification, and we'll be back with more news after these few words. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're talking about the immigration crisis in Europe. 10,000 Africans came into Italy just in the last couple of weeks. It isn't just Middle Easterners, which we are told are fleeing the wars created by the United States. The goal of the New World Order is to blur all of the populations of Earth together to undermine our sense of a national, cultural, regional identity, to make it easier to control us. Nationalism is bad. Cultural identity is bad. Unless you're in Israel, then of course it's our natural right to be nationalistic and to have the master race, or whatever, God's chosen, whatever they call themselves this week. Apparently there's been yet another attack. 26 more German women sexually assaulted by immigrants at a concert. It's working out really well. Up in Sweden, they have actually evicted Swedes out of homes in order to provide free homes to the migrants. Because remember, a lot of these people are being lured to Europe with promises you're going to get a free home. Well, there's nothing free. They've got to take it away from somebody. Now, remember the BBC, which stands for Brits Buggering Children? The network that announced the collapse of World Trade Center Building 7 26 minutes before it actually happened, home of Jimmy Savile and the current train wreck of Top Gear. And I don't want to get into it, but I'm horribly disappointed in the current Top Gear. Apparently, BBC has adopted a policy of rejecting potential trainees who are white. BBC is out there saying they only want people from ethnic minority backgrounds. But of course, nobody should accuse the BBC of being racist. No. Racism is only when it's done to these people over here, not when it's done. Folks, common sense. You do not cure racism with more racism. It just doesn't happen. And if I were running a business, and I have in the past, somebody comes to me for a job. I don't care what color they are, what gender or orientation. I want the person who can best do the job. Meritocracy. We have lost that. We need to get back to it. We need to go back to celebrating achievement and excellence and accomplishment and stop telling excellent students to hide their excellence because the dummies are feeling excluded. Story coming out of Sputnik News. Half of Germans are open to a European Union exit. 2/3 want Merkel out. It's all falling apart over there. Another little article coming out of the Telegraph. There is no safety inside the arrogant, imperial, and dangerously unstable European Union. Yeah, look at what's going on. The riots in France, the Greek economic meltdown. It's not a good deal. It's a raw deal. The EU was a raw deal for all the member nations of the EU. Now, one of the reasons the Brexit is so popular is the British feel they've lost their own sovereignty because the EU tends to be dominated by Germany. And they really don't want to live in that kind of a situation, considering that, well, Germany lost the last 2 world wars. And that's another force that is pushing for a Brexit. Now, there's an interesting little article that came out in the Express where a top Eurocrat admits that the EU is heading for a collapse and the responsibility lies with Brussels for pushing too hard and too fast for the European Union superstate, the European army, the dissolving of sovereignty. And everybody's digging their heels in and saying, no, this is not what we want here. Now, remember, there was an upset in the last British election where Nigel Farage was defeated unexpectedly. It was a shock. Well, apparently that election result is on the verge of being voided because apparently his opponent violated British election law, in particular mandated limits on spending. And the situation's now being investigated, and there was a move to try and block this investigation, to block the probe, and the judge threw that out, said, no, this has to be looked at. Nigel Farage may have turned out to have been the winner if the election had been fair. Now, there's a little bit of good news happening on out there. You know all this idea of a free speech zone where you should just shut up unless you're inside this little cage that's out by the parking lot where nobody can hear you. And everybody made the very real argument, that's not freedom of speech when you are being told to be someplace where you're not going to be heard. And apparently more and more college campuses are starting to basically say this free speech zone, that's nonsense. You either have free speech or you don't. You shouldn't have constraints. And apparently there have been bills signed in Iowa and Arizona saying that these free speech zones are unconstitutional. Now, as you probably know, I spent my childhood growing up in New Hampshire, proud to be a Granite Stater, and even more proud today. They just passed a new bill, Senate Bill 522, which drastically reformed the civil forfeiture laws. And first and foremost, there must be a criminal conviction or a plea bargain of some kind before the state can take somebody's property. This idea of going on in and grabbing $10,000 out of somebody's luggage because it might be used for illicit purposes, that is now forbidden in the state of New Hampshire. And the state motto of New Hampshire is, live free or die. And it looks like they're starting to stand up to that. So congratulations, Granite State. Proud of you. Absolutely. And civil forfeiture was originally supposed to be about stripping assets from criminals to deny them the proceeds of their criminal activity. And police all across America just turned it into a new fundraising opportunity, just stealing whatever they wanted. And right now, under those civil forfeiture laws, the police are stealing more from law-abiding Americans than all the burglars, robbers, and muggers put together. And that is not the nation that we want to live in. It's certainly not the nation I want to leave to the next generation. It was absolutely absurd. Now, getting on back to human-caused global warming, there's a story about how there was this senior Environmental Protection Agency official, John Beale, and he's just about to complete a 32-month prison sentence for defrauding the government by claiming, while he was employed by the Environmental Protection Agency, that he also worked for the Central Intelligence Agency. And he just kept taking these long vacations that he said were missions for the CIA, and you can't challenge me. And apparently the EPA is continuing to give this guy salary awards even after he was caught defrauding the agency. Why? Well, because he's a senior policy advisor and he supports human-caused global warming and the demand for a carbon tax. They're all a bunch of fakers and frauds. By the way, there was a little heartwarming story from up in Canada, in Strathmore, where this very young girl was being taken shopping by her parents. And they said, do you want the shoes with the flashing lights because you've been talking about that? And she says, no, I want loaves of bread and cans of food. And the parents said, well, we buy that anyway. And she says, no, it's to give to the homeless. And she went on out there just on her own regard, feeding the homeless around her community. And the reason it caught the newspaper is because she was dealing with some heavy snow that's falling. And the headline was, "A little snow won't stop Strathmore girl from feeding the homeless." It's a charming story, but it's also a reminder that even here in the month of June, and yes, it's very north, but there's still snow falling. There's also snow falling in several locations in Russia right now. And yes, it's in the northern part of the country. But remember back in 2000, March 20th, 2000, banner headline, "Snowfalls are now a thing of the past." Wrong. Down in Australia and New Zealand, the ski season is opening very early this year. The snow is actually already causing all kinds of traffic and congestion problems. And here, all of a sudden, we're dealing with a cold snap. In May, it was getting warm. It was starting to look like tourism weather. And all of a sudden, it's cooling down. Now, yesterday was the official start of hurricane season here in Hawaii, which means I guess it's legal to go on out and shoot a hurricane. I'm not sure how you would stuff and mount one of those, but I think it would look really cool up there on that back wall next to the Conan sword and everything. But we're Claire's laughing in the other room. We're going to be paying attention to that as well here. All righty. Now, I want to get back to the situation with the Flint water scandal. And the scandal is not confined to Flint. It's turning out to be nationwide. And over at the Health Ranger, they had a privately funded study looking at heavy metals contamination of America's municipal water supplies. And they were studying the water out in Arizona, in California, and they were finding not only lead, but copper and aluminum. Now, aluminum is thought to be one possible trigger for Alzheimer's. You don't want it in your body. And yet it's in the tap water, which actually might explain a lot of what we're seeing coming out of the California government right now. And a reminder that if you are worried about your tap water, and you should be, you can go online and you can find these little water testing kits. Just go to eBay and just search water testing kits. I'm not going to recommend any particular brand, although the one that we got worked out really well, and it tested for lead, microbe content, actually about 6 or 7 different things. And it turns out the water coming out of our faucets here in Hawaii is very good. It's exceptionally hard, which makes sense when you realize we're sucking it out from inside a dead volcano. But we actually have good tap water here. But if you're concerned, these kits are like $20, $25. Well worth it to know. Because it may be that you need a filtered pitcher or a filtered faucet. Because especially when you get down to the lead, that causes permanent neurological damage. And even if you can get the lead out of your system with some form of chelation therapy, the neurological damage is irreversible. And the government doesn't seem to really care about that. In fact, the government seems more concerned with making it look like they're taking care of you than actually taking care of you. Because there's another story that came out over at Oraz.com. At least 33 United States cities were cheating their water tests regarding lead content. 17 different states. Now, this was an investigation by The Guardian that started looking at all this stuff, and they found these 33 cities, 17 U.S. states, and probably more of them. But they got the goods on these 33 cities, were literally cheating on the tests to be able to tell their population, sure, the water is great. You can drink it. It's not a big, go ahead and drink the water here. Now, obviously, all of this is a boon to the bottled water companies, but despite the labels on these bottled water products, which show snow-covered mountains and gleaming lakes, a lot of them are actually just processed and filtered tap water. And it might be worthwhile getting some of these water testing kits and testing some of these bottled water products to see if they're really cleaning up the water. Mostly they're concerned with the aesthetics. Does it taste good? And there are things in the tap water supply that the current state of the art, if filtering, can't take out. That's one of the big problems with municipal water systems that are recycling the water from the sewage system back to the taps. Things like unmetabolized prescription medications are not filtered out. It's a very, very, very reckless system. Now, talking about these 33 cities that were faking the water test, talking about human-caused global warming, there's an interesting report over at the Corbett Report where scientists are beginning to recognize all of a sudden there's a crisis of confidence. I remember last year National Geographic came out with this article, "Why don't people believe and trust science?" Well, first of all, science is not about belief and trust. If you want belief, that's called religion. Science is supposed to operate in an absence of belief or trust. It's supposed to be reproducibility of results and what the facts actually show. But governments and corporations have started hijacking science to be the new propaganda front. In the good old days, back in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, they could just bribe some priest at the local church to say, God wants you to use whatever it was they wanted you to use. God wants you to go on out and commit warfare and mayhem. Well, religion has ceased to be a powerful influencer of people, or as powerful, and so now they get a different kind of actor who takes off the funny little religious robe and puts on a white lab coat and gets on out there and says, yes, this is what you should believe now. But you shouldn't listen to anybody claiming to be a scientist saying, please believe me and trust me, because that is not science. And because there has been so much documented fraud, people are getting very, very skeptical. And they should be. They should be. Nobody should trust a scientist saying something. I mean, there's this latest report that's supposed to be out claiming that there's absolutely no risk and danger to GMO, and then you find out all the academics who were on this panel have deep financial ties to the GMO companies. If I had my choice, and we could get rid of Common Core, I would want to go back to an educational system that emphasizes science and math to basically turn Americans into their own scientists, able to decide for themselves, able to discern, able to analyze, able to figure things out. The reason Common Core de-emphasized all of that was the government doesn't want people who can think for themselves and figure things out. Common Core treats science like it is a religion. You will believe the earth is getting warmer. You will believe that humans are the cause. There's no verification of the claims. You're just supposed to accept it on faith, and that is anti-science. Faith and belief is anti-scientific, and we need to get back to actually looking at the world as if we're scientists. So, anyway. So there's this Corbett report saying scientists are saying that fraud is causing a crisis of science. And yeah, it is. There's a lot of fraud going on out there. And they did it to themselves. Absolutely. Now, there's a corollary over here, an article out of The Independent, where apparently Whitehall has managed to spend £2.5 billion every year on public policy research where nobody knows where it went, or millions of it is undocumented. And what they found out is that politicians who are funding these research programs, if the research program comes up with a result that doesn't match the policy, they bury it. We have two reports. One says GMOs are safe, and the other one says GMOs are dangerous. Well, we're going to just throw the dangerous one away here because the GMO companies are such wonderful contributors to our political campaign. And again, you shouldn't trust science. You shouldn't believe in science. If you want to believe, go to church. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. And as a matter of fact, somebody did just call into the show here. Alex in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I just wanted to let you know, which you probably already know, that I heard that for the popular vote of the Democratic presidential campaigns, they don't count any of the caucuses towards the popular vote, which kind of screws Bernie Sanders big time. I think that the race would be much closer if they actually counted that and quit counting the super delegates until the convention. Did you know that?
Yeah, I did, and of course it changes from state to state, but the party leadership is just changing the rules to get the result they want, and we're supposed to go along with it because, well, it's the rules. And it is an absolute affront to the democratic process here, and they tried to do it to Donald Trump, but the will of the people appears to be prevailing there. As far as Hillary is concerned, there's a real possibility she could lose California. And if she does, then her cachet of being the presumptive nominee goes out the window. And I think we're going to see an acceleration of her decline. Again, something like half of Americans think that her private email server was in fact illegal. Now, they tried to come up with this absurd poll where 70% of Democrats say that Hillary should stay in the race even if she's indicted. I'm not buying that one bit. For propaganda to work, it has to be believable, and I do not believe that Democrats are that corrupt down at the grassroots level where they're okay with a candidate who's facing a federal indictment for possible espionage as president.
Yeah, it's a joke. I just wanted to make this comment. I believe and have believed for some time that there's really not a two-party system. It's a one-party system. And I believe if they can just get our choices limited to Hillary Clinton and Trump, they'll be happy with either one of those presidents. And I think that what the Republicans would do if Trump did get in office is they would start saying, well, we told you it was going to be, we didn't approve of him, but we really couldn't stop it. But really, I believe they do approve of him and would love the opportunity to act out how they really feel instead of just acting like they want to disown him.
Well,
what do you think about that?
Well, again, Donald Trump is a major threat to the status quo because he's not a career politician. He's got his own money. He can't be bribed. He can't be bought. And what we, the American people, need to do is, in addition to getting Trump into the White House, we have to give him a Congress that will work with him rather than obstruct his every move. And that means we have to give a pink slip to all these established old order politicians who cling to power year after year after year. We have to get rid of all these Israel firsters. We got to pink slip all these war hawks. And all of these people who think taking more money from you and giving it to Wall Street is going to be the solution to all the nation's ills.
Yeah, but you know what, Michael? Trump keeps on acting like we need to build our military more. We don't. We don't need to. We need to work on peace and being peaceful, and we need to work from that basis, just like Kennedy was trying to do.
Yeah, look what happened to him.
I know, but I think what he was actually trying to do was probably in our best interest.
Yeah, there's something about, now, I've never been to Washington, D.C. I'd love to go, a lot of great museums to visit. But I can imagine that actually being in the White House is going to have a profound effect on people. And if you look at John F. Kennedy's early life, you know, he was a spoiled rich kid. His father was a rum runner. And they literally sent him down to the Pacific during the war to get him out of D.C. because he was getting into trouble with the girls, just like Bill Clinton. It's no wonder Bill Clinton admired John F. Kennedy so much, which wound up with the PT-109 incident, which made John F. Kennedy a hero in the eyes of America. And it also gave John F. Kennedy a taste of what war is really all about, which I think was probably one of the reasons that he was holding back and not pushing forward with that Cuban Missile Crisis. But I think John F. Kennedy walked into the White House and said, this isn't a game anymore. It's not a joke. It's not make-believe. I'm actually the president of this country, and I think I'm going to try and do the job the way it should be done. And that basically betrayed a lot of the people who had worked to get him into the White House, which I think was the beginning of the conspiracy to have him assassinated. Alex, stay on the line. Stay on hold. I'm going to come back and talk to you after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about the White House. We're talking about John F. Kennedy and how people are going to react to being in that White House. Looking at John F. Kennedy's youth and his behavior, you wouldn't have thought him to be the president that he became. And I think what happened is he walked into that Oval Office, and all of a sudden it hit him. This isn't a joke. This isn't make-believe. I'm the president of the entire country. And I think he decided that he was going to try and do the job the right way. And that, of course, made instant enemies of a lot of people who had been supporting him, such as organized crime, which had helped, to be honest, steal the election from Richard Nixon. And a lot of people thought Kennedy was not keeping promises that should have been kept. And I think that was the foundation of the conspiracy to assassinate him. I think the same thing happened to Vince Foster. Because it's one thing when you're down in Little Rock, Arkansas, and you're playing fast and loose with the laws, and, you're laundering money for the CIA and all the rest of that stuff. Yeah, and because it's just Little Rock, and it's Arkansas, and who cares? And then all of a sudden, you're in Washington, D.C., and you're working inside the White House. And I think it changed Vince Foster. And the reason I think that is because shortly before he was murdered, he gave a speech at a local university in which he kept stressing personal integrity is the most important quality that anybody has, that people know that you are a person of your word. And it was very obvious that Foster was delaying filling out those presidential blind trust documents. It was already 6 months late at that point. And I think it had to do with the fact that, first of all, if the trust was ever revealed to be fraudulent, which it was during the Whitewater hearings, Vince Foster would have gone to jail as the lawyer who signed his name to it. But more than that, I think Foster was just getting really cold feet about all the criminality he'd been a part of, and he preferred to resign. And I think that's what happened. And we may see the same thing with Donald Trump. Donald Trump has much less to bind him to the current political establishment than certainly Hillary Clinton does. And so I think Trump is going to be far more independent. He's going to be uncontrollable, and that's why he is such a threat to the current status quo. Alex, are you there?
Yes, sir, Michael. They'll take Trump. The powers that are in charge of the world, basically through the United States and Israel, have the ability to take anyone out. I mean, they did it to Kennedy. I mean,
yeah, but there's a difference here. There's a difference here. When Kennedy was killed and the corporate media said it was a crazed lone nut assassin, people believed that. It took something like 30 years to reach a point where half of America realized the Warren Report was a complete work of fiction. This is a very, very different world. If anything happens to Donald Trump, nobody's going to buy the cover story on this situation. They're immediately going to say, this was a political assassination to preserve the status quo. And they'll point the finger of blame in only a couple of different directions on this one. And that makes trying such an assassination much more risky, because everybody knows how close this nation is to erupting into outright chaos the way we're seeing across France right now. And nobody wants that to actually happen. That's bad for everybody's business.
Are they having uprisings in France? I didn't hear that.
Oh boy, you need to be paying attention over there. There are massive riots and protests all across France. They've been going on for a very long time. In fact, they're saying that this is the greatest uprising of the French citizenry since the French Revolution. And it's all because of that imposed austerity coming down from Brussels. Anyway, Alex, I'm going to let you go here. We're going to switch over to Mo. All right, we're going to switch over to Mo in Florida. Mo, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thanks for taking my call, Michael. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, the old sayings that, know your enemy, keep your, enemies, your friends close, your enemies closer and all that. But, my point is that, kind of go along with the rest of the callers, if you don't know who you're fighting, and like the old another saying, I don't know who said it, but the fish rots from the head down. Nobody identifies these people. I mean, yes, it's the powers that be, it's the money junkies, it's the the New World Order. But I was just curious to what, and I know they're groups, and it's not just one person necessarily, but I'm just saying, who would your top 5 be, if you don't mind? I would start off with Evelyn Rothschild, and I'll just hang up and get your answer.
Okay, well, first of all, I think it's a much longer list. It is a fallacy to think the world is under some kind of monolithic control. They're aiming for that, but right now you have different factions who are warring with each other for advantage. And yes, you've got the Rothschilds and their private central banks, then you've got this other group over here. But I would say the number of players who are the root causes of all that we're suffering probably number in the thousands. And it's kind of hard to put the finger of blame on any one of them. It's like I keep saying, wars and assassinations are never carried out for just one reason. The public will be told it's one reason. But basically what happens is you'll get these different factions who have their own immediate agenda, and their solution to the agenda overlaps with the solution for other people and their agenda. John F. Kennedy is a good example. Israel wanted Kennedy gone because he was blocking their access to nuclear weapons. The Federal Reserve wanted John F. Kennedy gone because he had signed that executive order issuing the United States notes. The Texas oil billionaires wanted John F. Kennedy gone because of the oil depletion allowance. The CIA wanted Kennedy gone because they felt he was getting in the way of their operations regarding Cuba. And on and on and on. And each one of these players had a different reason for being part of it, but they all overlapped in that the solution was to get rid of John F. Kennedy, and that's when it happened. Same thing with the war. All the players in war may agree to the war, but for vastly different reasons. And you need to start looking for that multiplicity of causes and agendas and get away from this idea that all of these historical events have only a single cause behind them, okay? All right, we're going to switch over to Tom in Texas. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, howdy, Michael.
Howdy.
What my concern is, we have these other independents that are running, like Mr. John McAfee and Mr. Gary Johnson.
Yeah.
And no one is giving them a platform to speak their piece. Now, my request is, I'm giving a shout-out to you, and I'm giving a shout-out to these other two gentlemen. Would you give them like 15 minutes of your airtime?
Yeah, I can get them on the show. We've had John McAfee on the program before talking about other issues. But, let's be honest, the reality is that there is not going to be a significant third-party challenge this election cycle based on all the numbers that are coming on in. And apparently Bill Kristol has absolutely flamed out with his new third-party candidate that he was going to try and use against Donald Trump, because it turns out the guy thinks that middle-class white neighborhoods should be destroyed in America.
Yeah, well, whoever Bill Kristol pulls out, it's going to be political suicide, because he will be known worldwide as the man that tried to sabotage Donald Trump.
He's already there. He's already there. Okay?
Okay. Well, thanks for your time, Mike.
Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Now, we are seeing more and more of these stories coming on out. This one's from Daily Bail on how Hillary Clinton may not be the Democratic nominee. And former Bill Clinton advisor and Democratic pollster Douglas Schoen is saying that he sees the most likely outcome from the Democratic convention as Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren running on the ticket. This is only June. There's a long way to go until November, and Hillary is in trouble. Good, 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 good. If she loses California next week, that's going to be the beginning of the decline. So Bernie Sanders, stay out of small suburban Washington, D.C. parks, stay out of small aircraft, keep your Kevlar tightened up there. Now, Paul Ryan has finally decided to throw his hat into Donald Trump's ring. He has come on out endorsing Donald Trump as the GOP nominee. And whether or not that brings Ryan's delegates with him or not, we don't actually know. But at this point, barring the unforeseen, Donald Trump is going to be the GOP nominee. Now, Bernie Sanders is out there campaigning, and he is promising that if he is elected president, he is going to institute a nationwide ban on fracking. This is not going to win him any friends with the oil companies, but I don't think the opposition is going to be that much, because right now, because of that oil price war, the fracking companies are deep in the red and going out of business anyway. But it was a dangerous practice. It didn't generate anywhere near the volume of harvested oil and gas they were hoping it would, and it's caused all kinds of environmental damage. So I'm definitely with Bernie on this one. Now, as you're probably already aware, the news media is still obsessed over this shooting that took place at UCLA. Yesterday they were saying it was a murder-suicide. Today they're out here saying the shooter apparently was from Minnesota, and he had a kill list of all the people he wanted to kill, which strikes me as kind of weird. If you've got a list of a bunch of people to kill, why kill yourself after that first one? So it already looks like there's some kind of spin going on where they want to turn this into some kind of an anti-gun crusade, or, you know, I mean, if this guy was a nut, the first thing to look at are those prescription antidepressants, because virtually all of the mass shooters, the gun grabbers wave at us, were either on or withdrawing from those prescription antidepressants, and they are very, very dangerous. Needless to say, the gun grabbers are all over the web screaming it's time to ban guns, which never disarms the crazies or the criminals. They can go down to Fast and Furious, get a brand new military-grade weapon, courtesy of the United States taxpayer. But I put up a graphic on my website, which you're free to copy off and use. And up at the top, it's got one of those gun-free zone signs, and it says, this isn't working. And underneath it says, let's try something different. And there's another sign that has a gun, but without the red circle and bar. And it says, 5% of the people here are carrying concealed. You guess which ones. To create a deterrent. No, I'm not encouraging or advocating wild shootouts on the campus. But the reason these nutcases and criminals and plants go into these gun-free zones is because they know nobody's going to shoot back. If you create the idea that there's even a possibility somebody is going to be shooting back at them, most of them are just going to turn around and go someplace else. Go on down to Disneyland or something here. Now, as you know, this glyphosate that's in Monsanto's Roundup is turning out to itself be as dangerous as the GMO itself. And there's a new study, this is reported in Natural News, showing that very low dose exposure to glyphosate alters your genes, and apparently alters genes in a way that can be passed on to offspring. It's a permanent epigenetic change that can cause serious health problems down the road. Now, somebody ran a story the other day where they did urine tests on the members of the British Parliament, and they found glyphosate residue in all of them. And I'm going to hit this one again. I'm going to keep on hitting this one over and over again. The Centers for Disease Control, which likes to pretend it's some kind of a government agency looking out for your welfare, but most of their funding comes from the industry, has been out there insisting all along that there is no evidence that links vaccines to autism. Then, of course, the scientist at the CDC who had authored the report that they were wagging at us came forward and said the report was a fake. The data was cherry-picked to come up to that conclusion to help the vaccine companies. Now there's this Dr. Hooker who's working with two members of Congress, and they've succeeded in prying loose documents from the CDC that confirm the CDC has known since at least the year 2000 that thimerosal, the mercury-based preservative in vaccines, does cause autism, and they kept it hidden. Now, there was a point where the U.S. government said, let's just get rid of the thimerosal. It's not part of the medicine, it's just a preservative, so the vaccines will last longer on the shelf, and reduces loss, increases profit. And the vaccine makers literally refused and said, no, we're not going to do that. It's going to cost us money. And there is an FDA rule you need to be aware of. when you look at the ingredients on medication or anything, if there's an ingredient that consists of less than 1% of the total volume, they don't have to list it. So you can have a vaccine that's got 0.5% of thimerosal, it will not appear on the packaging. And let's be very honest, when you get a vaccination from the doctor, you're not reading the package insert, you're just wincing as the needle goes in, and that's it. Most people don't read those package inserts. They're printed on, very thin paper with very tiny fonts. They don't want you reading those, but you should be. You have every right to know what is being pumped into your body, especially in an era where we're finding out the orthodox medical establishment, the medical industrial complex, is hiding this stuff. So now they know that CDC back in 2000 knew there was a problem. Their own epidemiologist pointed it out, said there's something going on here. And they just hid it. And once again, us wacko tinfoil hat wingnut conspiracy kooks turned out to be right. Isn't it amazing how often that happens? We'll come up with something, oh, you're a conspiracy wacko tinfoil hat time, yeah, ha, 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 ha. Then years down the road, yeah, turned out, yeah, it was real. Do you know the term conspiracy theorist was actually invented by the CIA in the aftermath of the John F. Kennedy assassination to dismiss everybody who was asking questions about the contradictory information coming on out about the case, especially during the Jim Garrison trial. We don't need to answer your question. You're just a conspiracy theorist. Anyway. Over in Phoenix, there's a doctor who's conducting an FDA-approved study on how marijuana can help veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder. And Dr. Sue Sisley wanted to give a lecture on her results to the medical staff at the Phoenix Veterans Affairs Medical Center. And the VA said, absolutely not. We're going to treat PTSD with things that have high price tags on them and not allow veterans to treat themselves with stuff that they can grow in their backyard. What would happen if people grow their own food and their own medicines? It would be chaos in the corporations. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, as you know, Donald Trump has been soundly criticized for his campaign slogans, Make America Great Again, and he's been denounced as racist. The Israeli media actually said it's anti-Semitic, to say put America first, because we all know that loyal Americans will always put Israel first. That's according to the rules we just made up over here. But what's interestingly is that one of our members just posted an article to WhatReallyHappened.com in which Bill Clinton was out there saying it's time to make America great again. So it's okay when Bill Clinton says it, but when Trump says it, it's bad and it's evil and it's nationalistic. Now, apparently Barack Obama is out there saying that Americans should be prepared for a disaster. And I don't think he means hurricanes and tsunamis and earthquakes. I think they're finally beginning to accept the fact that this global interlocked private central banking fraud is about to unravel. And Greece is coming up on a new payment on their unpayable debt, and it looks like they're not going to be able to pay it. For a very simple reason. The European Central Bank is sucking so much money out of Greece, nobody can start businesses, nobody can hire anybody. You cannot strangle a nation's economy and expect it to be profitable. But these money junkies, they are addicts. They don't see clearly. They are oblivious to the harm their money addiction causes the world. And the problem with being a money junkie is it doesn't matter how much you've got already. You get the thrill from more of it coming in. You get the thrill from standing in the windows of your palaces and looking at the massive humanity struggling just to find enough to eat. That's where they get that thrill. The documentary, Inside Job, which won the Academy Award for Best Documentary the year that it ran, reported on an interesting experiment where they took a bunch of these Wall Street traders and they wired their brains up to scanners. And they discovered that every time the traders hit a big score, the part of their brain that lit up was the exact same part that lights up when you do cocaine. And by the way, there is a lot of cocaine use on Wall Street. That was also that was demonstrated in Wolf of Wall Street. It's a wild, wild time. That's how these people are. Meanwhile, over in Europe, fewer than 500 of the 163,000 asylum seekers actually found jobs. The rest are being supported by the taxpayers, the legal citizens. The same thing here. We don't have jobs for these illegal immigrants coming on in. And Obama's out there saying, we have to let the illegal immigrants in. They're going to do jobs that Americans won't. Well, like what? Well, like voting Democrat, of course. Nobody else is going to vote Democrat except these people we're giving stuff to. There are no jobs for these people. There aren't enough jobs for the American people. We're going to take a break for our top-of-the-hour station break. We'll be back with the lovely Lady Claire after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And for those of you watching on BAM Music TV, this gorgeous creature sitting behind me is the lovely Lady Claire.
Aloha.
And what's your first topic today?
Well, there have been elements in Israel and Palestinian elements who are very concerned that it looks like in this cycle of violence that something is going to happen again in Gaza. Peace activists and Israeli military officials, it's just a question, Mike, of what is going to set this off again. And it's very frustrating to me because it does not appear that Israel is really looking for peace, but for territory.
No.
By any means
what they're looking for is a piece of Gaza and a piece of the West Bank and a piece of Lebanon and a piece of Syria. And they've never been serious about coming to any kind of an agreement, certainly not a two-state solution. Israel just wants it all.
Yeah. And there is going to be a point where I think the international community has got to step up to the table and say, enough, stop. Because otherwise we're going to have genocide in Gaza, complete and utter.
Yeah, and that appears to be Israel's goal, and of course, Netanyahu's new coalition government is just ultra right wing, to the point where it's actually causing stresses within the Israeli government and stresses with the military, which frankly would kind of like to pull back on some of the stuff that's been going on here, because it does make Israel look bad to the world. They're not able to stop criticism of Israel, and that's why we have Netanyahu who's out there demanding that the world censor the Internet and stop all criticism of Israel. You're not allowed to criticize us. We can criticize you, but you cannot criticize us. Remember what Voltaire said, to find out who really rules over you, find out who you're not allowed to criticize.
Oh, yeah, that's absolutely true. I'd like to move over to some statements made by President Obama, where he blamed, quote-unquote, right-wing radio for making people think big government is the problem.
What?
And he made an observation. I hope you don't mind me being blunt about this, but I've been listening to this stuff for a while now, and I'm concerned when I watch the direction of our politics. And President seems to be on a legacy tour. Legacy tour. And
trying to polish his image.
Yeah. And
good luck on that one.
The reality is we don't need talk radio to tell us big government is the problem. Our founding fathers warned of it long ago. And unfortunately for this guy, at least in my perception, and Mike, please chime in if you have a difference of opinion, except for the nuclear deal with Iran, this man has been a profound disappointment to those who nominally supported him the last couple of election cycles. And am I, as are so many million Americans, experiencing supporters' regret? Well, I think the answer is doggone heck yes.
Yes, very much so. I mean, basically, Obama was out there making promises to get elected that he never kept.
Yeah.
and this ridiculous idea of him being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize before he'd even really had time to unpack his briefcase in the Oval Office.
Yeah.
And then to turn out to be one of the most warmongering presidents in U.S. history.
Yeah, and I mean, for example, the Bureau of Labor Statistics very conveniently forgets those who have not participated in the labor force for some time. And as reported in October of last year at CNN, 94 million, let that number sink in, folks, 94 million Americans were not in the American labor force.
Now, these are Americans who are willing and able to work, who have not been able to find jobs for a very long time, but by simply moving them to another category, they are not counted as unemployed to get that 5% unemployment number the government likes to wave at you.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous. Also, under Obama's watch, child poverty is up scarily, and educational performance from our nation's kids is declining big time.
And by the way, in that Michael Moore documentary, Where to Invade Next, they talk about the educational system and what works in Europe so much better than what we're doing to our kids here under Common Core.
It was just an amazing revelation. And what was almost scary, and most of you know I do marketing for a living, these kids spoke better English than 90% of the people with whom I interface on the phone in California. I mean, that's scary. That's really scary. Also, under Obama's watch, the government now has, that we know of, close to a $20 trillion deficit. The middle class is rapidly disappearing thanks to continuing outsourcing and offshoring of jobs. And
well, there's more to it than that, because any time you see the rise of dictatorship in a country, the middle class has to be destroyed, because it is from the middle class that opposition to oligarchy is going to rise.
Right.
The Soviet Union, when they set it up, they designed a system that simply didn't have a middle class to begin with, which is why the Soviet Union lasted as long as it did.
Right. And, you know, people who voted for him didn't realize the unintended consequence of such a vote would be to plunge them into serfdom, where many are now working 3 to 4 part-time minimum wage jobs to barely replace the decent money they were making from their former jobs, which got offshored. We have also watched President Obama promise no boots on the ground in Syria, no boots on the ground in Iraq, and what do we see? We've got boots on the ground in the front lines in both countries. You know, that's very, very depressing, very concerning. Libya is an utter disaster, and there is talk of the U.S. military having to go back in and allegedly sort out the mess. Our veterans are not being cared for at all, and many of them are dying before they see a doctor at the VA, and many of them have had their benefits just discontinued because they were declared dead. And that gaping hellhole, better known as Guantanamo Bay...
Gotta watch your language.
Sorry about that.
Yes.
...is still practiced on its prisoners, and it's still open. And didn't President Obama promise us to close that place down?
Oh, yes, he did.
Yeah, and let's talk also about the pre-positioning of NATO and U.S. troops and personnel in Eastern Europe as a provocation to Russia. And it's very obvious that this is a build-up to an actual war between the U.S. and NATO against Russia. And the encirclement of Russia with various countries which have been drawn into NATO is almost complete, with Montenegro soon becoming the most recent member of NATO. And let's not forget China and the provocations our military have done in the South China Seas with those alleged freedom of navigation exercises. This sets us on a collision course again with China to prevent the rise of the gold-backed yuan, which is not dollar convertible. And, you know, we're headed toward sort of a complete disaster.
Well, this was the whole theme behind that article. All wars are ultimately bankers' wars. It's all about who's got the money, who's in control of the money, whose fiat currency we're expected to borrow at interest and then work our lives away to pay back. It's a gigantic fraud and a scam.
Yeah.
And any time a country tries to have an honest money system, the other countries that are already enslaved to private central banks will come in and make war on them. That was the reason for the War of 1812, was because the U.S. Congress refused to renew the charter for the first bank of the United States.
Yeah. And thinking people in this country, and I'm sorry, Mr. President, but we have the right to be concerned about big government, not because it is big, but because it is collectively hubristic, believes it can do anything it wants to with impunity, and benefit the money junkies, and is woefully dysfunctional.
And it's very expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at how many people work for government versus those who are left over to actually do something that makes money here.
Yeah.
And I keep saying this before, what we need right now in this country for the United States government is a cash for clunkers program, where we take our old, bloated, costly, inefficient government, we take it over to the junkyard, put it in a little mashing machine, make a steel coffee table out of it, and then each one of us get a check for $25,000 with which to buy a new, smaller, more efficient government. I think that's the solution.
Yeah, I think so too. And I'd like to move on over to this issue of the long TSA lines.
Oh, don't get me started.
There is a question asked by a website, and I will do this gently. When the excrement hits the fan plan by Max Slavo. I did that gracefully.
Thank you very much.
You must admit.
Our on-air affiliates will thank you
yes,
and bless
I know.
you and pray for you.
And he is wondering if the TSA long lines are part of a scheme to move Americans to mandatory biometric background pre-check system. And problem, reaction, solution. And the TSA has been never really effective at catching or reducing terrorists.
Actually, they haven't caught any.
Yeah.
In 15 years of operation, the TSA has not actually caught a single real terrorist, and the Inspector General of the Department of Homeland Security has admitted 95% of the practice guns and bombs that are sent through those security gates get through and get onto the airplane. I mean, that's how inefficient they are. Now, we know that the TSA is trying to push everybody for what's called the pre-check program, which is $85 and a bunch of private personal information, which I always thought the NSA already had anyway.
Yeah.
And it's just another way of shaking down the American people. The problem with biometrics is that it is not an absolutely reliable technology yet. They have tried biometric scanners and sensors in pilot programs at airports that generate thousands and thousands of false positives. It's not a developed technology, but there's big money in forcing the country to use this, and so we're going to roll it on out there.
Yeah, and Jay Johnson, the head of Homeland Security, has dubbed it the easy pass of airports. Well, honey, let me tell you something. If I have to wait 9 hours for a half-hour flight, so be it. I'm not signing up. And let me explain to you why. Many people who have actually signed up for this program wound up having to go through the entire TSA screening, no matter if they were pre-cleared or not.
Which confirms my theory. It's just a shakedown. It's a protection racket. If you don't pay me the $85, something bad's going to happen. Like maybe you miss your flight, or maybe your luggage loses things here. So you want a little protection. You got to give us the vigorish here. And it's just about another way to suck more money out of the American people here. And again, like all other federal government programs, huge cost, serious inconvenience to the American people, and absolutely no benefit. They've never actually caught a terrorist.
You know, and I am really
And they still owe me a laptop, by the way.
Yes, they do.
And listen, from the TSA, I mean, look at the lovely lady Claire here. She's in her 60s. I'm not going to give you the exact number.
It's
She's
okay.
a choir director at the local church. Do you really think this is somebody who has the potential for hijacking an airliner and taking it someplace it ought not to go, especially when the airplanes that we have here in Hawaii can't get anywhere other than Hawaii?
Yeah, and what I'm seeing here is sort of a back propagation into Code Napoleon law, where we are all now considered guilty until proven innocent. And that's as backward as you can possibly get, folks.
That's tyranny and dictatorship.
Yeah. I'd like to talk a little bit about Germany and something that they did that I thought was very good.
Okay.
Germany today acknowledged the Armenian genocide,
which has caused Turkey to
recall
their ambassador in a snit.
Yeah.
And Israel's out there saying, no, there's no genocide but the one that Germany did to us. How dare you equate the Armenians, to this other stuff.
Folks, every genocide, when it happens, needs to be called by its right name. You don't pussyfoot around this kind of wanton killing of a group of people just because they're fill in the blank, the wrong religion, the wrong ethnicity, etc., etc., etc. And there is a very quiet genocide going on right now in Myanmar, the former Burma.
Yes.
The Rohingyas, who are Muslim. And, you know, I never thought in my lifetime I'd have to say, darn, watch out for the Buddhists. But apparently, you know, I think the Buddha would not be terribly happy if he were to come back in spiritual form and say, guys, you know, cut it out. This isn't what I taught you. This is not what I'm about. But every human being on this planet, whether I've met him or not, they're my brother and my sister. If I see someone hurting someone, I have to call on it and say, don't do this anymore. And the same thing for every genocide that's happened. Another thing about Europe, this is not so good. Apparently, Europe is going to send conspiracy theorists to re-education camps.
Wow.
You're not a European, dear. I think we're okay, at least for a while longer. Citizens in Europe who break the new hate speech rules on the Internet, including those who spread conspiracy theories online.
Say that 3 times fast.
Oh, boy. Will be forced to attend re-education camps. I'm not making this up, folks. According to Section 7 of the European Framework National Statute for the Promotion of Tolerance, juveniles convicted of committing crimes listed in Paragraph A will be required to undergo a rehabilitation designed to instill them in a culture of tolerance.
And, of course, very prominent on the list is questioning the Orthodox account of the Holocaust.
Everything.
They send you to the re-education camp.
Yeah. And they've got all of these things listed. And, Mike, what I'm seeing is that Europe is on a very slippery slope to criminalizing logic and fact if it gets in the way of an agenda.
Absolutely.
That's where it's going.
Again, there's one victory that the independent media can rightfully claim for itself at this time in history. We have removed from governments and corporations their ability to lie to the public with impunity, and they're in a panic because if they don't know any other way to run their business other than to lie to get what they want. We're going to grab a real quick phone call here from Nate in North Carolina. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, you two. You know the old saying, 2 heads are better than one. You guys were just talking about the president and his record somewhat.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I'm trying to wrap my head around this article that came out the other day about Obama, and he's riding high, and he could be the ace in the Democratic Party nominee's pocket. They referenced Clinton's pocket, but I don't know if she's going to be able to make it. But anyway, what has this guy done other than wreck this country that has him at a favorable polling number?
Well, I wouldn't trust the polling number to begin with.
No.
And Obama's trying to basically ride his star power and his celebrity, but that may not be as strong a deciding factor as he'd like to think. A very common problem that we see both in politics, and I certainly saw a lot of it working in Hollywood, were individuals who started believing their own public relations and their own publicity and confusing that image with the real world. And they start to really think that everybody does love them and they're wonderful. But it may not actually be working, especially with this revelation that we're about to see our Obamacare health premiums jump by 60%.
Yeah, that's intense.
That Obama may very well be damaged goods. And yes, he's out there trying to support Hillary Clinton. He's gone on the warpath against Donald Trump. And they really are scared of Trump. And Obama is not out there supporting Bernie Sanders. He's there for Hillary. And I think a very possible reason for that is if Hillary goes down for espionage, with her email server, the fact that Obama went on over to the court and tried to block the depositions in the Judicial Watch lawsuit makes him an accessory. And it's obstruction of justice, which is an impeachable offense. And so now Obama has welded his own personal political future to that of Hillary Clinton. And that is going to be an interesting experiment.
That could be some baggage that she may not want.
Well, I think you've already reported that he's kind of guilty of misprision. The White House knew that she was having an email problem, didn't they? And
yes, they did.
Yep.
Yeah, yep. So, All right. Well, one quick thing, too. I know you're pressed for time. this is such an insult. With you reported yesterday that they could be grooming Biden and Warren to run together. What an insult to Sanders.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. If Hillary goes down, Sanders rightfully should be the Democratic nominee. In fact, I think he already is. If it weren't for the superdelegates and the massive election fraud, Bernie Sanders would be the Democratic nominee. And then Claire and I could kind of celebrate that both the Bushes and the Clintons are now out of the political scene for at least the foreseeable future. Pop open a bottle of champagne or something.
That would be lovely. That would definitely be lovely.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, we're gonna take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Hello, hi America. Welcome back to the show here. And earlier in the program, I was talking about how an Air Force Thunderbird jet that overflew the graduation ceremony at the Air Force Academy crashed shortly thereafter, apparently from engine failure. Now we are getting word that one of the Navy's Blue Angels jets just crashed in Tennessee. This one had a worse outcome. The pilot was killed. Apparently, the airplane crashed right after takeoff, so obviously a major system failure. And it's another reminder of how overextended our inventory of weapons really is, despite all the money that's being spent on this on the military.
Yes, and I would imagine that because the aircraft is older in both cases, that the people doing the mechanical repair have got to scrounge for parts.
Well, a lot of them go on out to that boneyard out in Arizona and grab extra parts off of parked aircraft, but sometimes that is not in really good shape either. I mean, it's just been sitting there for years with all the dust and everything, but, you know, obviously, two in one day, one from the Thunderbirds, one from the Blue Angels.
That's scary.
Or maybe the Air Force shot down the Blue Angel just to keep things even. I don't know what's going on, but yeah, it is a tragedy. Yeah. Fortunately, no buildings were hit by the FA-18 when it came on down.
Well, I would like to ask a question that I think our readers and listeners need to think about a little bit. Why do the Post Office, USDA, EPA, and Department of Agriculture need SWAT teams? And it appears that all throughout the U.S. there are governmental agencies that have no association with national security acquiring military-like equipment, according to News Talk KFLD. Many agencies are receiving SWAT teams, including the Department of Agriculture, the Railroad Retirement Board, the Tennessee Valley Authority, the Office of Personnel Management, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Education Department. Michael, what the doggone heck is going on here?
Well, by golly, they're going to make sure you stay with your Common Core curriculum, I guess. I mean, it is a little ridiculous.
Yeah, it's
but,
terrifying.
You know, what a cushy job here. What do you do? I'm the SWAT team for the post office. Oh, do you have to work it? Not really. We'll just sit around and look good, and we get paid lots of money.
Yeah. And the trend is truly terrifying, and apparently there's no end to this in sight. And in my world, employees at these agencies should be public servants and not public bullies who believe they have a license to kill or hurt with impunity. This is a bad relationship between a government and its people.
Well, it strikes me that this is a reaction by a government that has grown very much afraid of its own people, but there's a flaw with that. A lot of these agencies they're talking about are not going to be seen as targets by an angry American people. And let's be very, very honest. Most people working in civil service are not going to want to put their own lives on the line to protect their bosses from an enraged American populace. And they're probably going to drop all that fancy SWAT gear and run like heck.
Yep.
And then we can collect it all up and resell it on eBay under the slogan, never fired, only dropped once.
Right, right. I would also like to take a look at a more serious issue, and this one just gets me very angry. Apparently in New York, the New York Catholic Church paid lobbyists $2.1 million to block child sex abuse law reform. This really bites. I mean, I'm sorry. From the end of 2007 to the end of 2015, the New York Daily News reports that the New York Catholic Conference, led by Cardinal Timothy Dolan, paid top Albany lobbyists more than $2.1 million to help block legislation, including the Child Victims Act, which would have made it easier for victims of child sex abuse to seek justice. And if passed, the bill, a version of which is still pending, would change New York state law to allow a one-year window in which the victims older than 23 could bring lawsuits against their abusers. Right now, such victims are restricted from suing under current law. And state records show that the conference, a group representing the bishops of the state's 8 dioceses, retained a lobbyist to work on a number of issues associated with statute of limitations and timelines for commencing certain civil actions related to sex offenses. We believe this bill is designed to bankrupt the Catholic Church, said Dennis Prowse.
All right, we're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. We'll follow through with this. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And Claire, what is your next topic?
Well, I'd like to go back to what this gentleman, Mr. Prowse, said when he made the observation, we believe this bill is designed to bankrupt the Catholic Church. And I have a short memo for this guy. The Catholic Church appears to be completely, utterly incapable of stopping this illness, which is child abuse among their priestly ranks. And if the Church is unable to fix this, then perhaps maybe they deserve to be bankrupted.
I would agree,
you know,
absolutely.
I'm sorry.
And again, I don't have an issue with what people personally want to believe in, whether it's God or Jesus or Quetzalcoatl or the Flying Spaghetti Monster. But obviously, when you have any institution that is exerting power and authority over people, there's going to be a tremendous desire to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
And if somebody is of a predatory nature, and they don't want to face the consequences for what they've been doing, you know, those white robes are tremendous protection. And one of the reasons this scandal got so out of control in the first place had to do with the fact that you just didn't criticize or question the clergy. It was just unbelievable that these men representing the supreme moral authority of the universe would be behaving in this way, and yet we know all along that they have been. So there's another movie out called Spotlight.
Yes.
Which is a dramatization of a series of articles written by the Spotlight column for, I think it was Baltimore, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, the Baltimore newspaper, where they were the first ones to have the courage to go on out and say, look, there is something seriously evil going on with the Catholic Church and these young people. And that presumption of holiness and morality and everything really did protect a lot of very, very bad behavior. And underneath some of those white robes, you're going to find some very black hearts.
That's unfortunately the truth. I do agree with you. I'd like to move over now to the Middle East.
Please do.
The Houthis in Yemen and their allies have been able to liberate key areas in Yemen's Marib Shabwa. Officials with the Yemen's ousted government said on Thursday that the Houthis and allies forced militants loyal to the resigned President al-Hadi to retreat from the area. Fighting reportedly continued in those areas for 3 days. Unfortunately, 80 people have died. I don't know how many were civilians. Apparently, Shabwa was the area where they issued the highest number of casualties. Closest source to the al-Hadi former government claimed that the retreat was due to the lack of support from the Saudi regime. The warring sides have been engaged in some intensive talks in Kuwait to resettle disputes, which have been mediated by the UN, and that started on April 21st. And now we are seeing some more direct contact. I'd like to hope that this is going to stop the fighting, but I wouldn't hold my breath. In fact, this war has been going so darn badly that UAE has wound up hiring numbers of private mercenaries to assist them. And, I would like to see peace come forward, but I don't know if that's going to happen, Mike.
Well, the problem here is that the United States has gone way too far down this path that Wesley Clark blew the lid off of the U.S. conquering or controlling or regime changing all the resource-rich areas of the world, including the Middle Eastern oil nations, in order to shackle those resources to the U.S. dollar. And it's quagmire after quagmire after quagmire, but the U.S. government can't say, all right, I guess this isn't working, we're going to turn around and go back, because at that point, all their political support from the warmongers would vanish, the military industrial, the economy would implode almost immediately. They're stuck on this path. They're from their point of view, they have to see it through, victory or death, other people's death.
Yes.
Their victory, other people's death.
Right, right. And I'd like to go back to the state of the American economy. There were a couple of articles that I read that were very cogent.
Oh, wait a minute. Before we do that, we got a caller waiting on the line.
Okay, good.
Fred in Utah, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Fred, are you there? Hello, Fred. Oh.
I'm here.
Okay, good. I couldn't hear you. What's on your mind today?
Hello, Lady Claire, and you.
Hello.
Mike. Anyway, a few days ago, I heard that Jerry Brown, governor of California, endorsed Hillary Clinton just about 1 week before the election.
Yes.
So the fact that I know Jerry Brown so well after he two-term for those young people, they don't know Jerry Brown. He was two-term governor of California. His father was governor of California.
Right.
Then he went to India for rehab, so he became earthy guy and a hippie. Came back, became governor of Oakland, and he was spending every night, instead of going to a house or his residence, he will put a bed in the office of the mayors in the yard, so he would sleep there to save money for city of Oakland. And so he became very clean and honest man. Now the fact that I'm just saying, because he was honest, Mike. I heard him directly that he said that I used to get paid, and I was serving those people they were paying, and I was doing some work for people also. So I want to be clean. This was when he wanted to run for president. At any rate, now the fact that he is saying, my opinion is, which I want to ask your opinion, that I think Hillary Clinton is so desperate that has put some pressure maybe by Hollywood guys like George Clooney and so on to force him to endorse her, and I do not hear exactly his voice how he has endorsed her. Because sometimes, yes, I endorse her. Sometimes they emphasize that, she's great and this and that. So I wonder your opinion and Claire's opinion.
Well,
why he endorsed her just about a week before election.
Well, I'm sure that there's a lot of back-channel politicking and going on. I wouldn't presume that Governor Brown is any more honest than he was earlier in his career. Frankly, it sounds to me more like a PR stunt that he went through to try and rebrand himself as more honest. I don't think that necessarily guarantees anything about him. We know that Governor Brown did not do anything to try and intervene some of the abuses we're seeing the bottled water companies doing in California.
Yes.
And at this point, I'm sure Hillary is just issuing all kinds of promises to everybody who will endorse her. If I become president, I will do this for California and I'll do that for California. Yes, Hillary has a lot of celebrity endorsements coming out of Hollywood, Susan Sarandon being an obvious exception. We know that George Clooney actually has political ambitions of his own, that he wants to step out of film and into politics somewhere down the road. Now, I admire George Clooney as an actor and a director.
And a good fundraiser.
Well, I haven't been to one of his fundraisers, so I wouldn't know. But
$350,000 per couple.
Well, that's why we didn't go to his fundraiser. I've got about $1.50 in my pocket right now.
Right.
But here's the problem: being a really good actor doesn't make you a good politician. Ronald Reagan was groomed as president because he would take his script and he'd read his lines very, very well. But George Herbert Walker Bush was actually the power behind the throne. I mean, when he was president, Reagan had Alzheimer's, and that was pretty much it at that time. Anyway, listen.
Nancy always used to give hints when he used to make any speech.
Well, I'm sure they had the teleprompters and everything else going on. Anyway, Fred, thank you for the call. Going to let you go.
Thank you.
We're going to switch over to Mark in Georgia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good day, sir. I was just, seeing a lot of these Peter Schiff things about the end of the dollar on the 28th of May, and now I'm seeing the same thing saying the same thing in September. I think we're on the same page that the collapse of the petrodollar that we never agreed to is inevitable. It's just a question of when, and we can all speculate, and some people may have some kind of information, but do you have any take on what they've done recently to keep this scam going?
Well, they have the keys to the printing presses or the computer terminals where they can just create all the money they need to paper the problem over. But again, they're dealing with the issue that the more instant money they're creating to keep the stock market propped up, the more down pressure it puts on the dollar internationally at a time when the U.S. is trying to use the threat of military force to get the world to go back to dependence on the dollar for global trade and banking. So they're actually working at cross purposes. Now, in terms of prognostication as to when things are going to unravel, that is very difficult because the controllers of the banking and governmental systems are changing the rules constantly to try and play for time. The immediate goal, of course, is to keep the economy looking semi-healthy until the November election. And after that, I'm expecting things to really start to unravel. But as long as they can go on changing the rules, it becomes very, very difficult to actually put an estimated time when these events are going to happen, because of the fact that we're trying to make our forecasts and predictions on the basis of the current rule set, but that could be completely different next week.
Yes. Well, I think that's one thing I point out to people. I've looked at this passage very carefully, and if you know about the Liberty Bill, the Liberty Bell with a crack in it, and it has cast on the side proclaim liberty throughout the land. That's from Leviticus 25, and I've looked at that passage very carefully. It doesn't explicitly say anything about forgiving debt.
Okay, Mark, I'm sorry, we're having a really, really bad phone connection here. Obviously,
right.
Are you there?
Can you hear me better now?
Much better now, yes. Okay.
Yes, okay. Well, I just held the microphone closer to my lips.
Okay, always a good idea.
Yeah. What I'm thinking is, what if we had some way of lawfully acknowledging, if somebody loans you, and that word lending is one of those fraud terms that's been used around the world, like they conjure currency into being that didn't exist before, and there's more debt than there's money, so-called money, available to pay it.
Mm-hmm.
And the only legitimate solution I see is to lawfully recognize, excuse me, what you loaned us was counterfeit. And I've had people argue, well, as long as you can buy and sell, it's like you're saying as long as the counterfeit is credible in terms of keeping an economy going, then it's not a counterfeit. The fact that the Federal Reserve System has never had a legitimate charter, and the fact is...
Oh, it does have a charter. It does have a charter. It's an open-ended charter. But, okay, Mark, let me get in here for a second, because the counter-argument to saying that the money coming out of the Federal Reserve is legalized counterfeiting is absolutely correct. If you get a counterfeit $20 bill in change, and you don't know it's counterfeit, and you buy something with it, and the store clerk doesn't realize it's counterfeit, yes, you have bought and sold food or soft drink or whatever with it, doesn't change the fact that it was counterfeit. Now, there was actually a legal case, the Credit River case, where a man successfully thwarted foreclosure of his home by going into court and saying that basically the bank did not actually provide any consideration, anything of real value for the mortgage. They just typed the number into the computer, into the account so he could buy the house, and the court actually agreed with him. The lawyer in the case got disbarred. The judge got really depressed and committed suicide shortly thereafter. And while the Credit River decision has never been overturned, it's just been arbitrarily declared as bad law. But that really is the heart of the scam. The Federal Reserve System is just creating money out of thin air. It's make-believe money, and they loan it into circulation at interest, but you must work and do what people who have more of those ink and paper notes tell you to do. That's the system of enslavement. And, you know, the Congress and the President who sold us into that slavery betrayed the nation. They basically put us back into the same kind of predatory banking that we fought the revolution to be free of. And I hope it's not going to take another revolution to break free of it. But that's exactly what's going on. The private central bankers know that those pieces of paper and colored ink have no worth at all. The item of value is you, the human being who feels a sense of obligation to the bankers. That's the item of value, your servitude.
And of course, the coercive, manipulative system that sells this, the idea that you've got to pay this extortion racket called the income tax. And the thing is that, so we're in agreement that basically, if we had some way of just wiping out all these bookkeeping entries, from there the question is, how do we allocate resources that is fair to people that just want to make an honest living? Now, to people like Peter Schiff, I don't have a quarrel with him because he knows that there's a problem, and his father wrote this incredible book called The Federal Mafia, and he died in prison just when he was supposed to be about ready to be released because he committed this heinous crime of telling the truth. And so the thing is, I think we need to have some means of an extra governmental means of demanding indictment and prosecution, because we know that Hillary has been playing this game. She's got dirt on people, and that's what's been keeping her.
Yeah,
from
that's
being
exactly
popular.
right. She knows where all the dead bodies are and how they got to be dead bodies.
And I don't think that I'm not saying that Hillary should be prosecuted alone. I think anybody she has dirt on, that boil needs to be lanced. We need to, and so when I speak of the militia, I'm not talking about rednecks with guns. Guns and ammo, it's a necessary part of having a legitimate militia. But the main thing is people being informed.
No, you're out of date. You're out of date. This revolution is not going to be fought with guns and bullets. This revolution is being fought and won with keyboards.
Well, that's yes, but you would agree then that a toothless militia is not a militia. And so I'm not saying that it's mainly about guns and ammo. It's mainly about being informed, meaning you're using your critical thinking, you're objectively examining what's going on. Like people acknowledge that this global warming thing is just as much a hoax as the war on terror.
Yes.
Being informed means that we use the reason our Creator endowed us with to examine what's really going on. Organized means we're working for a common purpose of having a system that works fairly for everyone. Let's see. Discipline means that people are held accountable across the board. And if, say, for example, a militiaman misused his weapon, there's a consequence for stupid behavior. And let's see.
Well, you're starting to meander all over the place. I think we're basically it gets back to the idea. I don't want to see a revolution in the streets of America because the wrong people get killed and crippled in these things. And in any event, the idea of an armed revolution is actually so 20th century. And as I said before, this revolution is not going to be fought and won with guns and bullets. It's being fought and it's being won with keyboards and information. Okay? So thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We're coming up here on a commercial break. And Claire, why don't you go ahead and sort of tease your next story that we'll get to for the last segment of our program today.
I will tease it. And it sort of dovetails with what you were talking about in terms of the economy. And the article is titled The Startling Truth About How Working Families Are Truly Faring in This Economy. And the short answer is not well. And
again, that's the situation. Again, that Michael Moore movie, Where to Invade Next. You've got to watch that.
Yeah.
It is going to open your eyes about just how much American society has declined. We've got to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the last segment of our program here. And again, a reminder, tomorrow's show will be a repeat best of show. And we'll be back live on Monday. So, Claire, take it away.
Well, apparently our politicians have stood idly by as millions of good-paying jobs were shipped overseas, and our economic infrastructure is absolutely gutted. And multitudes of small businesses have been choked to death by miles of red tape. Now, we are reaping the consequences. In America today, no one has a job in 1 out of every 5 families, and there are more than 100 million working-age Americans that currently are not working. And thanks to our transition to a service economy, many of those who are working are deeply struggling as well. According to the Social Security Administration, 51% of all American workers make less than $30,000 a year. And the Federal Reserve says that 47% of all Americans could not pay an unexpected $400 emergency room bill without borrowing the money or selling something. That means that about half the country is flat broke, and things get even more precarious for working families with each passing day. Now, back in the 50s and 60s, wages and salaries earned by workers accounted for around half of all of the domestic income. But since 1970, there has been a precipitous decline, and during the Obama administration, we have hit an all-time low. In other words, the share of the pie being enjoyed by working families just keeps getting smaller and smaller.
And then they wonder why we're not going on down to those shopping malls and buying the latest and greatest devices. And it really is a very destructive process. It's because we've allowed the money junkies to just give free rein to their addiction without any control, and it's time for an intervention.
Yeah.
You know, for these poor suffering money junkies, we've got to round them up, and we need to put them in therapy, which is a big oak paneled office with plush carpeting, and there's a dollar bill on the floor that's wired to a spark coil, and every time they grab that dollar bill, they get a nasty shock. We can save these money junkies from their own addiction. We're almost to the end of the show here, and again, I want to mention Michael Moore's latest film, Where to Invade Next. It is on pay-per-view. We linked to the website. There are private screenings all over. There's no distribution deal. You can buy the DVD and the Blu-ray. We're going to buy a stack of DVDs and give them out to people.
Absolutely.
You need to watch this film. That's your homework for this weekend. Michael Moore, Where to Invade Next. It will. You will be shocked at just how much America has declined. They're not boiling you slowly like the frog anymore. They just plunk you into the boiling water right now. When you see how the United States treats its people versus all these other countries, it will shock you. And it's a very well-done movie. Again, I don't agree 100% with what Michael Moore says, but I think this is probably his best, most powerful documentary ever, 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 ever.
This is a swan song. For sure.
I hope not.
Well, you know, swan song until the next great documentary.
Well, the swan song
usually is the
that's
last.
Your last one because the swan dies.
Well,
Swan Lake.
Okay.
You understand?
Yes,
okay.
yes,
Yeah.
Okay. Well, but
Michael Moore, I don't agree with you, but I hope you make many, many more of these films.
We both
would love to work with you.
Yes.
There's the music. Time for us to get on out of here and get something useful done for the rest of the day. Tonight is choir rehearsal night. Ooh, joy. Oh, pleasure. We'll be back on Monday.
Take care.
Aloha, America.